Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about a 2024 election matchup between President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. It's pretty insane to think about that Kamala Harris is our first woman vice president. That's someone who has broken so many barriers for women across this country, and it's just crazy to think that we are in the moment having a woman vice president in the White House. This is history. She is living history. And looking at what her sort of view from the general public is that she isn't liked as much as you would expect from someone who is the vice president of the United States. Typically, these are characters who stay out of the fray. But Kamala Harris made a name for herself from the very beginning. When Joe Biden was tapped as the 2008 Democratic nominee, he had polled at 1-2% in terms of national numbers in 2008. He was known for running in 1988 and having to immediately drop out of the presidential race there. But Kamala Harris started off in this 2020 Democratic primary as a little-known senator from California, ultimately challenging Joe Biden out on a debate stage, receiving a lot of support following that performance on the debate stage. And, Joe Biden eventually tapped her, of course, as we know, to be his vice president. It was certainly a pick that many people saw coming, and I think that it was a very wise choice, given that he did end up winning the presidency. But now in this scenario, Kamala Harris is going to be on her own. She's going to be without Joe Biden at the top of the ticket, and she's going to be rerunning for president of the United States in this scenario, which means essentially, Joe Biden's still in office. We're not going to any type of speculation to, really anything horrible. No, we don't even entertain the discussion here. But looking at this 2024 presidential bid, it's very possible that President Biden decides not to run for office in 2020, citing that he may not believe that he's a representation of the current times, or that he just doesn't want to run. People have the ability to do that. It is unprecedented for an incumbent president to not decide to run, at least in modern history, unless there's obviously huge things going on. But, generally, we could expect Joe Biden to announce that he's not running, and no one would really be shocked. Maybe surprised a little bit, but I would be surprised, but I wouldn't be shocked to say, oh my gosh, this is so unexpected. But looking at this Kamala Harris bid, it would likely be defined by her tenure in the state of California as a senator and, of course, as vice president. And I think that we're going to see a lot of attacks from the right wing, especially about her previous record. And, the thing about her being vice president is that she can shift all the blame towards the Biden administration. Honestly, she would have the scapegoat essentially of just saying, I'm not the one calling the shots. That's the president of the United States. I don't agree with everything that he's doing, which is here's how I would do my administration differently. And I think that's where she could really have some type of weight on the overall discussion about her serving as Joe Biden's vice president. And Donald Trump, of course, would have to return to this political discussion, this political environment, which he's already been shunned out of by many members of the press, many social media sites, and many members of the American electorate. And looking at this point in time, Donald Trump probably wouldn't be the best candidate for 2024, though he certainly is the top name being mentioned as of right now. So looking at this eventual electoral map, there will be regions of the country where Kamala Harris might improve compared to Joe Biden, and then there are certainly regions where she does not improve compared to Joe Biden. And I think this has to do with just the strengths and weaknesses of certain candidates. Kamala Harris having her own individual strengths in certain regions of the country, in certain demographic groups, while Joe Biden had the opposite, but also together they were able to form a winning ticket in 2020. But before we get into the swing state analysis, let's talk about the favorability rating of Donald Trump, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris. Joe Biden's approval rating is almost directly correlated with the way that people view Kamala Harris, the way that people approve of Kamala Harris's job as vice president. We do have the approval rating of Joe Biden's numbers up. We do not have the approval ratings of Kamala Harris's numbers up. There are barely any polls that actually discuss whether or not you approve of the job that the vice president is doing, more so with the president and then the administration, rarely ever the vice president. But we do have favorability polls, which are pretty good indicators, I would say, of what the approval rating might look like. So overall, Joe Biden is approved of 52.9% to 38.3%. So that's a pretty large amount. That's something that the Democrats should be happy with. We're talking 16.7% on average, throughout the past month. Looking at the favorability rating for Joe Biden, this is a little bit different. This is not approval in terms of, do I think you're doing a good job as president? Do I think you're doing a bad job as president? Take that all out of consideration. Do you like Joe Biden? Do you like Kamala Harris? Do you like Donald Trump? That's the questions that are being asked. So on your screen, you see that Joe Biden currently has a net 11-point favorability rating, which means that 41% of Americans may say, no, I don't like Joe Biden, but 52% say they do. And the reason why I'm using Real Clear Politics is because they actually have these favorability ratings. I would love to use it on 538 if they included that on their website, but for right now, we're going to stick with RCP just because they have it. But as you can tell, I'm sure if you've been watching my videos recently, they're not my go-to. They were in the past, but they are not my go-to for right now. And, looking at the favorability rating for Kamala Harris, it does decrease. The unfavorability rating isn't as high, but it could be due to the fact that there may not be as much name recognition. And I know what you might be thinking. Who on earth doesn't know who the vice president of their country is? Well, honestly, many people. That's just the reality of the American electorate. You know who Biden is. You know who Trump is. Some people couldn't even tell you who Mike Pence was, right? Some people couldn't even tell you, who Kamala Harris situations where, I don't know if my screen recorder cut out, but I'm reminded of all those instances where we actually see people not knowing who top political figures are. And I think that might attribute to the reason why Kamala Harris's unfavorability rating isn't as high and why her favorability rating is lower. But also, she's not as likable as Joe Biden. And I think that's something that has really come across through the character campaign that the DNC did. Because, before the DNC had occurred, Joe Biden was not approved of. The overall, net amount was just negative for Joe Biden. I think we can actually see the favorability rating. Well, maybe they took it out. Political leaders' favorability ratings. I guess they took it out. But it showed you the overall change over time. And what you noticed is that Joe Biden was in the negative prior to the DNC. If you watch the DNC, you will know that was a very character-building type of campaign style. Not much was said about Kamala Harris, but of course, she was announced as the VP right before. But there wasn't enough time, I would say, for the DNC number one to prepare this entire type of campaign where they were rebuilding her character. You see, Joe Biden's approval rating improved because he was referred to as a family man, as someone who could connect with the American people. And he rode that into Election Day. Kamala Harris will be taking a lower favorability rating, but still doing better than her opponent. Donald Trump, in terms of those who approve or disapprove of him as a person, we see right now that even after he's out of office, it's negative 15 and negative 18. The last two polls since he's been out of office have shown him with an unfavorability rating. 41% approve, or 41% have a favorable rating, 39% don't. So that's a sort of, a backstory towards what we're going to be looking at and how you can actually assess the candidates. Discussion about the approval, not the approval rating, about the matchup between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And the overall matchup reached a point where, we're talking about a 4, 5, 9-point margin of victory on the popular vote, but these weren't super accurate going this far out. I mean, they gave us a general idea of how the election would turn out because they showed Joe Biden winning, but, she was underperforming Joe Biden. So I don't think she would be able to win as large as Trump would against Donald Trump, but I think she would be able to do maybe a little bit better than what he did in 2020. And that might spoil the end of the video, but realistically speaking, Donald Trump can't return from being, at the highest point of disapproval as he was leaving office throughout his entire presidency. I mean, he reversed what 4 years could have been, going from negative to positive and made it even worse to a point where his final day was the worst day in his entire administration. Isn't that something? The final day of your presidency is the worst in terms of the disapproval rating in the entire country. How do you even manage that? Out of 1,462 days, it just so happens your last one, the legacy that you leave to the American people, the way that people view you, you end up with a very negative position. That was what really doomed Donald Trump's campaign for 2024. Because had he not sort of built this idea that the election was rigged, maybe he could have re-entered in 2024 with an approval rating, leaving office with someone who could offer, old ideas with the same recognizable person, someone that people had voted for in the Rust Belt, someone that people had voted for in the Sun Belt, and possibly return to win in 2024. After the Capitol insurrection and the second impeachment trial, I don't think so at all. So looking at Donald Trump, he may be able to still win in certain regions of the country that he previously won in. Obviously South Carolina and Alaska, but we probably won't see a likely Kansas. And, while I do think Donald Trump would lose some support, he would also gain back the support he has had amongst white voters that Joe Biden peeled over because of the 2020 election circumstance, because Joe Biden did better amongst white voters than Kamala Harris did. Plainly speaking, looking at the demographic breakdowns, if you're looking at the poll on a poll-by-poll basis, you will notice that Joe Biden does better amongst white voters than Kamala Harris. And I think while that may not have super big implications, which is what you will see by the end of this, is that there are subtle states where, Kansas, which was only a likely state by around 0.1, may no longer be a likely state. And we won't see Indiana and Missouri reduced down to being likely states in the GOP column. Again, it's all just a matter of where Donald Trump would still solidify that support and what he'd actually gain in terms of the, we are not talking about a COVID-19 situation. We're not talking about, a high turnout election. If white voters still turn out in the same way they did for Donald Trump, maybe not in terms of the overall number itself, but, he wins them over by even a much smaller amount, he still was able to win in certain areas that he may not have been able to do previously. And it won't be any major state flips or any state flips at all, at least for Donald Trump. But you will notice is that some states won't be as narrow as they would be had Donald Trump ran against Joe Biden or had Donald Trump, comparing it to his election performance in 2020. So as we go through, what you're noticing is that I'm going to characterize Iowa and Ohio and Maine's 2nd District as likely states, again, for Donald Trump. And I think this also goes to show that, Kamala Harris's grip amongst voters in this region will not be as strong as Joe Biden's. Now, Joe Biden didn't win Iowa or Ohio. He lost them by likely margins. But, even though Donald Trump did decrease in support, I still think these states and district could also end up being likely for Donald Trump yet again. Looking at the white working class voter share, especially that rural boom, because that absolutely happened here in 2020. Looking at those results, I think Donald Trump just has enough support to hold on to be in the likely column in this region. And also with that decrease in specifically white working class support, at least if we're talking about the Rust Belt region, or at least this region from Pennsylvania over to Iowa, because that's not always the Rust Belt. Iowa isn't in the Rust Belt. Looking at this section of the United States, we could likely see a decrease in support in Minnesota for Kamala Harris. Maybe no longer a 7-point margin, but rather 4 or 5 points. Over in Michigan, rather than a 3-point margin, maybe something a little bit less than 1%. Less than 1% in Pennsylvania, and less than 1% in Wisconsin. While I don't think Donald Trump would be able to win back Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, I don't think he would that she would be able to improve on Joe Biden's margins. Maybe Joe Biden could, but I don't think Kamala Harris would be the one to do it, because I do think that there will be a drawback in terms of support from white voters, and that could be for a variety of reasons. But Joe Biden certainly had that Rust Belt appeal that could not be ignored, which is why he won it. It wasn't a super solid Rust Belt appeal, but it certainly was there. Otherwise, he would have not won those states. So Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, while weakening areas for the Democrats, ultimately end up going to the Democrats regardless. It's a winner-take-all system. Who cares? But the margins do matter when you're looking at a comparison-by-comparison map. But looking at this, strip, if you win it by 1 vote or 10,000 votes or 1 million votes, it wouldn't matter. You still win all of the electoral votes. And that's how our electoral college system works. So when you see it in the tilt column, while that may be viewed as a bad performance for Kamala Harris, at the end of the day, it's a victory for the Democrats that will last for 4 years. So 233 electoral votes for Kamala Harris at this point, 148 for Donald Trump. I still think that he will be able to hold Texas. Texas might flip in 2024 given perfect circumstances for the Democratic Party, as they've outlined in their recently announced plan to flip Texas blue. But other than that, I really don't think that it's something feasible. I certainly think that it will be narrower than it has been in years past. Looking at the 2020 election result, it was the narrowest it had been since 1996. So looking at Joe Biden's performance, he only lost the state by 5.6%. That is stellar for a Democrat. And I think that they could continue that looking into 2024. But you also have to realize that they could continue it, but it might not be enough to flip the state to blue. So I think it'll be lean. I don't think it'll be likely safe or tilt. So that's 189 electoral votes for Donald Trump. Kamala Harris at 233. Let's get a few smaller states out of the way. I don't think that Kamala Harris would win Colorado by a safe margin. Joe Biden could. I don't think that she would be the one, especially with a state with a huge amount of white voters. That's actually every state. But specifically in Colorado, that was a group of voters that had turned away from Donald Trump at a very large level. Looking at the voting block here, I think that it will remain in the likely Democratic column, which is a wide range, but still, ends up with the 10 electoral votes going to Kamala Harris. This actually gains an electoral vote relative to 2020. New Mexico would remain in the likely column for the Democrats, but I don't think that New Hampshire would. I do not think New Hampshire would remain in the likely Democratic column. I think that Maine at large will, just because of the Maine's 1st District driving it towards the left. But New Hampshire, I could see narrow up narrowly. Maybe down to 4 or 5 points, not 7. Looking at New Hampshire in 2020, that was actually a very strong performance, especially in a traditional swing state, but did not replicate, across the map. Joe Biden still lost a number of swing states that maybe went to, Obama by lesser margins than certain states, or, went to maybe Clinton, but didn't go to, went to the Republican, or went to Clinton, but didn't go to, certain candidates. Certain states didn't go to Clinton as well. Virginia went to the Republicans. New Hampshire went to the Democrats. But looking at the state itself, very, very, very high proportion of white voters, this entire region, 100%. We're talking about a lot of them. If you're looking at the demographic trends over the next 50 years, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, this entire region, they are not expected to gain as many minority voters or minority citizens percentage-wise as the rest of the country. There's a reason for that, and I think that also is going to be a deciding factor in future elections. But looking at New Hampshire, I think that it could narrow up with Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee. And also, I think that, Joe Biden was just an exceptional candidate amongst college-educated voters, and I don't see the same type of appeal for Kamala Harris to the fullest extent. Looking at the Rust Belt, she's still winning it. Looking at New Hampshire, she's still winning it. She's still winning Maine, but it won't be by as large of a margin. And, but she will make up for that in other areas. I think that she'll offer some type of regional appeal, especially to the southwestern region of the United States, but I don't think it's enough to actually flip major states, Texas, Montana, obviously, Kansas. I'm just thinking about the states that have been the narrowest out of them all. But looking at Nevada, looking at Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, while I don't think that she would be able to do better than Biden in Colorado, possibly do better in New Mexico. Overall, I think the characterization ends up the same. It really doesn't matter. But looking at her performance amongst white voters, if you're comparing the same exact polls from 2019 that she was on, where she was beating Trump by 6, but Biden was beating him by 9, you do have to look at those numbers. And you do have to realize, wait a second, why did Kamala Harris underperform him? The same reason why, she would underperform him in 2024, or would have, had she been the nominee in 2020, or, any other type of election. But so far, we're at 254, 189 electoral votes for Donald Trump. And here's the state that I think that Kamala Harris will easily win. I think the state of Virginia is definitely going to move away from the Republican Party, undoubtedly. I also think that she would win the state of Nevada. A likely margin might be pushing it. I'm thinking more so in the lean column for right now. I don't think that it's a state that is going to be pretty solid for the Democrats in the foreseeable future unless something changes about the state's demographics significantly. I mean, it's already a state with a very large minority population, but unfortunately for the Democrats, they aren't able to win both the white voters and also the minority voters in the same rate. They made peak in one election in 2012 with minority voters and then peak in the other with white voters in 2020. But until you're able to master that, have that perfect middle where you're winning both voters, it's going to be difficult, I think. And I think that also, while it may still be a Democratic victory, there's a lot of work Democrats can do in Nevada to make the state more reliably Democratic. But 273 electoral votes for Kamala Harris, 189 for Donald Trump. Let's go ahead and characterize Arizona and Georgia and North Carolina and Florida so we can wrap up this video. What I'm expecting to see. Oh, I forgot one. Nebraska's 2nd district. I'm moving it down to lean. We're going to see not Hillary Clinton. Sorry about that. Kamala Harris not do better than Joe Biden, but still win in very similar parts of the United States. But you have to take a look at the margins. I want you guys to compare it to other election prediction videos or other types of your own election prediction, what you're expecting to see versus what I'm showing you, what the results were in 2020 or 2016 versus what you're seeing right now. I want you to compare it because you will find interesting trends in certain regions of the country where Kamala Harris might do better or might do worse, or certain states, certain battleground states in particular, where she might do better or where she might do worse. And I think that will be a telling sign for looking ahead, what the Democrats can do without, Donald Trump on the ballot, what they can do with Donald Trump on the ballot, what they can do without Joe Biden on the ballot, with him on the ballot, with Kamala Harris without. Overall, I think that is just adding to our overall political discourse, and I think it'd be very good to compare it yourself, just going beyond what the video shows you. But Arizona, I'd characterize as tilt for the Democrats. Georgia, I would as well. Looking at the state's demographic shift so far, I will say the Democrats will have a more reliable base in 2024. 4 years from now, we are talking about hundreds of thousands of more Democratic voters in these two states. They're rapidly growing in terms of population, Arizona specifically. And while there may be a drawback in terms of the amount of support that Kamala Harris receives amongst white voters, she will make up for that amongst minority voters, especially considering there will be more of them in 2024. Had she ran in 2020, I do not think Georgia and Arizona would have gone to her by the time we had reached Election Day. It went to Joe Biden. But looking at 2024, I think we're talking about similar margins here, just with a decrease in white voters, just an overall increase in the sheer amount of minority voters in the state. We're also talking about a decrease possibly in rural turnout, but Donald Trump will still tap in to very similar basis that he did in 2020. So looking at the election results in 2020, we'll see a very similar map, but subtle changes. And, we are going to see Florida vote the same way. I think that Donald Trump will still be able to retain just that small amount of support enough to win in Florida. Democrats have just had a continuous streak of losing in the state, and I think it will be continued through 2024, possibly in the 2022 midterms. I actually made a video about that today, so you can go ahead and check that out at the top right corner of the screen. But looking at the overall the shift in Florida so far, I'm not super confident the Democrats are going to do super well in the Florida races coming up in 2022 or 2024, which is why I think that Donald Trump at the end of the day would end up winning Florida by a very narrow amount. But a win is a win. You get all 31 electoral votes. But in North Carolina, also increasing in terms of minority voters, I think that there will be enough for Kamala Harris to flip the state to the Democrats, even though Joe Biden may not have been able to do it. We're talking about a different type of electorate here. And, while it may be subtle, Joe Biden only lost the state by 1 point. So looking at the state of North Carolina, it's within the grasp of the Democrats in 2024, especially with Donald Trump's newfound unpopularity that he had experienced in the past, but will likely carry with him, considering he's going to have no possibility of really rebuilding his vision or the way that people view him across the country, because he won't have social media. He will rarely ever have public events where he'll be speaking at in terms of news coverage. He may still hold rallies, but obviously, if you're going to a rally, chances are you already support the guy. So looking at Donald Trump as a person so far, I really don't think he's going to recover. I don't think that he's going to recover in terms of the way that he's been vilified by the media now, the way that he's been characterized by many Republicans, and of course the Democratic Party. I don't think he's going to recover from being the second impeachment, from his second impeachment, being the only president in United States history with crossover support in the conviction vote and a second impeachment. I mean, looking at Donald Trump's legacy, all of the negative happened. A lot of it happened in the final 2 years. And, that's going to be in the minds of a lot of these American citizens. He was the president of the pandemic. He was the two-term impeached president. He was someone who was, discussed with Russian collusion. So looking at Donald Trump, I think that a lot of that is going to carry over into 2024. And while the American electorate is easily forgetful, I think that the Democratic Party is going to do a good job to remind them about, who they're talking about here and, who they're working with on the overall election. So final map, Kamala Harris at 318, Donald Trump at 220, and that's pretty much it. The only state that flips is North Carolina, but take a look at those margins, narrower than they were in 2020 in certain states, larger than they were in others, but overall, the map ends up 318 for the Democrats, 220 for the Republicans. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.